Welcome back to the Hale and Hearty Horses podcast. I'm Dr. Rebecca and I am your host. Today we are talking all about a unique aspect of Chinese medicine, and that is called Tui Na. So one of the fundamental principles of Tui Na is knowing when to soften and knowing when to mobilize. It is this question that actually makes Tui Na so effective on our horses. This idea of softening or mobilizing works through two complementary and somewhat opposites that show up in other areas of Chinese medicine as well, and that's described as Yin and Yang. Today, we're not going to give you a how-to episode, but we are going to go a little deeper dive into Tui Na because it's all about understanding what Tui Na is, where it comes from, how skilled practitioners decide when a horse needs quiet, listening hands, and when the horse's body is ready for movement and mobilization. Having this fundamental understanding of this type of body work can not only help you as the horse owner realize the power of this work, but also the flexibility of this on your horse. Many times in this podcast and in other videos I've done, you have heard me talk about staying under the brace. Tui Na has the same dynamic through this discernment of using either the Yin style or the Yang style, and it all depends on what the horse needs in the moment. And this can be the biggest difference between helping a horse or overwhelming a horse. So let's give a little brief history of Tui Na so you have a little better understanding of where it came from. Tui Na is one of the oldest branches of Chinese medicine, dating back with documentation over thousands of years. Historically, it was not a massage therapy, it was not a spa treatment, it was not for relaxation. It was actually a medical treatment. At its origins, Tui Na was commonly used to treat soldiers, martial artists, laborers, or people that were recovering from an injury and needed to regain function. Many classical Tui Na techniques were developed specifically for the martial arts injuries, where circulation, joint mobility, and internal balance needed to be restored quickly and effectively. This origin matters, and it also explains why it's so helpful for our horses. Tui Na was and still is about restoring function without violating the body's internal order. So I'm going to repeat that because of its importance to today's topic. Tui Na was and still is about restoring function without violating the body's internal order. And that's why I say it goes beyond massage therapy. It goes deeper than that. And this philosophy actually translates really well to our horses. So let's go deeper into what Tui Na actually is. Tui Na is often translated as Chinese medical massage, but that phrase doesn't quite capture it. Tui Na is actually not massage like we think of in the typical Western medical sense. It's not about kneading muscles, and it's not about mechanically manipulating tissue. Tui Na is a therapeutic system of touch that works with qi and blood circulation, with the meridian systems, with the fascial system and soft tissue, with joints and movement, and actually with the nervous system as well. At its core, Tui Na is about restoring communication within the body. Rather than forcing it to change, it removes barriers so the system can organize itself. And this is where the two faces of Tui Na actually emerge. So we have two types of Tui Na. We have the Yin style and we have the Yang style. In Chinese medicine, Yin and Yang are not really opposites. They're not in conflict with one another. They're actually qualities that exist together in every system. You will have yin within yang and yang within yin. In the horse, yin relates to rest, to nourishment, to stillness, and to internal regulation. Yang relates to movement, to warmth, to circulation, and to outward expression. And the health of the horse depends on its ability to move in between these states. You don't always want to be in rest and digest phase, and you don't always want to be super active and in movement. Whenever a system becomes stuck, either it's too tense, or maybe it's too collapsed, it's too reactive, or it's too shut down, imbalance develops. Tui Na responds to this by asking a simple but profound question. Does this horse need to soften, or does this horse need to mobilize? So let's talk about the two different styles a little bit. Yin Tui Na at its core is about knowing when to encourage the horse to soften. This is the quiet work. It's slow, it's sustained, it's gentle. It involves a deep listening through the hands, very similar to what I described in the last podcast with craniosacral therapy, where there is this soft touch that is encouraging small shifts in the horse that actually end up being quite profoundly large shifts internally. To an observer, it can look like very little is actually happening, but internally it can be a great deal of shifting. Yin Tui Na is often indicated when a horse is chronically tense, when they're guarded, when they're living in pain, when they've got this pain-adapted body, especially in their stance, when their nervous system is dysregulated, or when they're carrying a long-standing compensation or trauma. I personally turn to Yin style Tui Na in many competition and race horses because all of these above scenarios are usually true and present. They are usually compensating for some sort of long-term dysfunction. Their nervous system is usually highly dysregulated, and they are usually guarded to the touch. From a physiological perspective, this type of work supports parasympathetic regulation. It influences fascial mechanoreceptors. It encourages tissue hydration, and it helps the body reestablish internal safety. In these cases, mobilizing too soon can actually increase resistance, and you don't actually get the response that you want. It's kind of like if you go in and you get too aggressive too soon, the body braces, the body resists the change that you're asking of it, and you actually don't get as good of results or most profound shifts as you do with the Yin style Tui Na. So what does this look like? This looks like the horse that stiffens when you go to palpate it, or it has no reaction at all because it's totally disassociated from its body. And the Yin style Tui Na helps them come back into their being, come back into their core, like to come back into their body and to feel what's really going on. And that allows for the healing to take place. It's important to remembering that just because there's softening doesn't mean that it's weakness. It's just preparation. Very often, movement becomes possible only after the body feels safe enough to allow it. So that means safety physically, mentally, and emotionally. This type of touch is what most horses hardly ever experience in life, but it can be a profound and earth-shattering experience for them. I see when I work with horses that they become more open to every type of holistic modality once they have experienced this type of soft, gentle touch that helps them reconnect to their body. And then it helps all of those modalities work better. There is some amount of safety and groundedness that happens when you work with a horse with craniosacral therapy or Yin style Tui Na that you really cannot get if you're just approaching it from some of the more movement-oriented body works. Okay, so now let's talk about Yang style Tui Na, and this is all about knowing when to mobilize. So it has a very distinct, different quality to it, and it is rhythmic, directional, mobilizing, warming, invigorating, and circulating. This is the face of Tui Na that encourages movement and flow. So it's often appropriate when the horse presents with cold patterns, stagnation patterns, structural restrictions, scar tissue or adhesions, and reduced mobility. When done skillfully, Yang Tui Na encourages circulation, but without force. It restores movement to joints and tissues, and it re-engages the body's adaptive capacity. But I really want to make a critical point here that the Yang style work without the prior listening part of the Yin style can actually become too mechanical. It can become too much that you think in your head this is what needs to be done and you go and do it instead of actually listening to the horse. So I often start with the Yin style first, because you want to be careful that you're not just going in there and overwhelming the horse, overwhelming their nervous system, and you really want to make sure that you're supporting the change that you want to see happen and that it can't be forced on the horse. In fact, the best and most effective mobilization usually rests on this foundation of the Yin style first. So ideally, each session would actually incorporate both of them. There would be this pairing, there would be a relationship between the softening and the mobilizing. You would be sort of flowing between one and the other. In fact, I have found that the most effective Tui Na sessions are not purely yin or purely yang. They're when I'm listening to the body and the body is showing me what it needs, where it needs in the moment, and I'm actually flowing between the two styles. And it's a conversation. It's a conversation between me and the horse. It's a conversation between these two styles where I might need to support with yin, but then mobilize with yang. And so a practitioner may begin by softening, allowing the system to settle, allowing the horse to accept the touch, and also allowing the horse to reveal where restrictions really live. And then gently mobilizing that once the horse is ready. Or you can actually introduce some light movement and then return to the stillness of the Yin style as the body learns to integrate the change. The deciding factor is never the technique. It's never a mental decision. It's more in response to the horse. And this is where experience, patience, and humility can matter way more than strength or technique. To me, this conversation between the two is what really works and what matters most for the horse. The horses are extremely sensitive to touch, to pressure, and to intention. I think we talked about intention in the craniosacral podcast. And even the ones that have been mistreated understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get at when you start with the Yin style. When you show them that you can be trusted, that you're never going to overstep, that this work isn't about force, even those who have been guarded before will learn to let go in ways that they've never done before. And it's almost miraculous to see the changes in the horse, both on a physical level and on a mental, emotional level. This combination of yin and yang style helps regulate the nervous system. It is so important in that area, and that is always the goal. Because when you're doing hands-on work that actually ignores the nervous system, even a well-meaning treatment can create bracing, withdrawal, and ultimately really inhibit the body's ability to heal itself, and even the mind and the spirit's ability to heal itself. Tui Na, when practiced correctly with an understanding of when to soften and when to mobilize, respects the horse's biology, it respects the nervous system, and it respects the body's own timing. It does not chase symptoms. I talk about this a lot, that we're not there just to work on symptoms. We are there as practitioners to work on the whole health of the horse. And this type of work supports that whole system reorganization. So let's talk about some examples, because I think that will be more helpful for you to understand the difference. So Tui Na is about receiving information first and then supporting regulation and tissue nourishment. So one example is this idea of sustained still contact. So the hands will rest gently on an area of restriction and there will be no immediate movement. The pressure is soft but present. It's very similar to the craniosacral therapy where we talk about that 5 grams of pressure. And the practitioner just waits for changes. You literally are just staying present in the moment, waiting for a change. The change could be in the tissue, it could be in temperature, it could be in the breath of the horse, and it can just be this subtle melting or softening. So what's happening in this example is the nervous system is actually given time to downshift, and the fascia begins to hydrate, and the body is allowed to reorganize without being pushed. Another example of yin style Tui Na would be slow, deep, and following. So this would be very minimal movement, but the hands will follow the tissue. So they're not directing the tissue, they're just following what the tissue wants to do. This would be very similar to craniosacral therapy, where you are following the unwinding of a tissue. And the pace is dictated by the horse's response, not by the practitioner's plan. What's happening in this example is that this supports the horse feeling their internal physiological state and restores communication between the tissue layers. Okay, so another example was example number 3 is actually holding points along a meridian pathway. This could be thought of a little bit like acupressure because it's a gentle contact that's being held over time with an intention. There's no rubbing though or no kneading, and it's often used in areas that feel empty, guarded, or withdrawn. What's happening here is that the qi and blood are encouraged to return to areas that have been functionally offline. Example number 4 is actually working in stillness after movement. So this would be that you had been doing some yang style Tui Na and movement has occurred earlier in the session, and now the practitioner wants to return to stillness to allow integration. So what's happening here is the body is actually consolidating change rather than being rushed into the next intervention. So that's just allowing the body after the movement to actually integrate the change. Okay, so now let's talk about a couple examples of yang style Tui Na. So again, yang style is about encouraging the flow, the circulation, and the movement. And of course, we only want to do that once the system is ready. So example number 1 is rhythmic rolling or gliding. And this is a repetitive, even rhythm. It's directional in movement, usually an intentional direction of movement. And it's moderate pressure, but not forceful. And what's happening here is we're looking to increase circulation. We want the tissue temperature to rise, and we're moving stagnation so that we can resolve it. Okay, another example of yang style is mobilizing along a muscle or along a fascial line. Now you can actually mobilize along a meridian as well. So we have clear direction. We are engaged like larger, broader tissue planes, a larger area of the horse's body, and will often follow known movement patterns. So what's happening here is that we're looking at structural restrictions and we're addressing them in a way that respects the continuity of the tissue. Example number 3 is a gentle percussive or vibratory input. If you've seen this done, you would start to really understand why you would need to start with yin style before you did something like this, because otherwise it could be a little bit off-putting if a horse has not been accepting of the touch, if the tissues have not softened and hydrated already, that the percussive part of this style of Tui Na could actually really get the bracing going on. But instead, when it's done at the right timing and in the right way, it's light, it's very elastic in quality, it's brief and very targeted, but it's used to awaken an area and kind of stir things up and get things moving. So what's happening here is we're actually looking for neuromuscular engagement, and we're trying to increase that without overwhelming the system. So that's why I said a lot of times if you actually saw this done, you'd understand why we might need to start with a softer touch first and get the horses starting to shift in the right direction. Example number 4 is a dynamic work around a joint. So this is mobilization within the horse's available range of motion. So not forced. We're not forcing a larger range of motion. We're actually working with the horse in the range of motion that they can do. We're coordinating it with the breath. So what you'll notice is that when you're looking at mobilization in this way, you're actually going to increase the mobilization and the freedom in that joint, but you're doing it in such a gentle way that it's never being forced. So what's happening here is that the joint nutrition improves and movement patterns are reintroduced. So I want to just come back to this key distinction between the two. So Yin Tui Na listens first and creates the condition for change. The Yang Tui Na responds by guiding movement once the body is ready. However, it's important to point out that Yin and Yang often appear in the same moment or in the same session, and skilled practitioners will move fluidly between the two. And actually, when you get really good, one hand can be doing one and the other hand can be doing something else. The horse, though, determines the timing, not the practitioner, and the practitioner is only responding to what the tissues are communicating that they are in need of. So this is very much like craniosacral therapy, where the practitioner is responding to the needs of the horse. When you step back and you look at these examples, it becomes very clear that Tui Na isn't just massage, and it's not just a single technique. It's defined by timing, responsiveness, and restraint. The hands are not imposing change. They're not making it happen. They are listening for readiness. And that discernment is what separates mechanical body work from truly therapeutic touch. What both the Yin style and the Yang style Tui Na share is an underlying respect for the nervous system, whether that work is quiet and still or rhythmic and mobilizing. The goal is the same: to support regulation first and movement second. In all of this, Tui Na teaches us something fundamental. Healing is not always about doing more. More is not always better. It's about responding appropriately. It's knowing when to soften and when to mobilize. It's not just a skill of the hands, it's a skill of perception. And just like I say, one of the drastic changes in my life was when I did craniosacral therapy, when I learned it, was how well it honed my ability to perceive the smallest, tiniest change. And that is also what Yin and Yang style Tui Na can really hone in the practitioner. And when we honor that distinction, when we honor those two different phases, that's when the body can do the rest. So we're actually, like we talked about in the very first podcast when we talked about holistic medicine, that we're just setting the horse up to heal itself. This is another way that we're just setting the horse up and letting their body heal them. We are supplying the means and the wake-up call to the horse's inherent intelligence, and their body knows what they need in the moment to ultimately spread healing, energy, and presence throughout their entire system. Thank you for listening and taking time to explore this work a little more deeply with me today. If these podcasts and conversations resonate with you, I encourage you to find me on TikTok. I share daily equine health discussions and reflections over on TikTok on everything from nutrition to movement to Chinese medicine and beyond. You're always welcome to join me there as we continue to learn more about integrative and holistic healthcare for horses, and I'll see you here next time.